Straight Life by Art and Lori Pepper. This is episode 15 of Straight Life, re-recorded. In episode 14, Art Pepper was doing his basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Patty came to visit him and got pregnant on purpose to satisfy herself and the family. Art was not happy. In episode 15, Art is in Durham, North Carolina, and he goes out for an evening's entertainment. Here's Art's narrative. When I finished basic training, they shipped me to Camp Butner, North Carolina, and put me in the combat engineers. And while I was at Camp Butner, I heard that Benny Carter's band was going to be in Durham, and they were having their concert on a Saturday night when I'd be free. I went into Durham and found the auditorium. I bought a ticket. I noticed the ticket said Loge. I said, "What's the Loge?" The guy tells me, "That's upstairs." I said, "I used to be with this band. They're old friends of mine, and I like to be close to the stand where I can say hello to them." The guy says, "Well, you can't do that. Whites aren't allowed downstairs." When Benny had told me I couldn't go with the band down south, I didn't understand it. I had been all around Central Avenue for years as a kid. I couldn't understand what he was talking about, and my eyes were still closed at this time. I was shocked, and I tried to argue with the guy, but he said, "You either take a Loge ticket or you don't go in." I went in and took my seat. I looked downstairs. The whole bottom floor was black. The people upstairs were white. The band started playing and I started drinking, and finally I just walked downstairs because I had to see them. I snuck through the dance floor. I walked real fast, and as I approached the stand, I could feel the people staring at me, and then they started moving, and all of a sudden they just closed me in. All of a sudden there was a circle of black people around me, and they were saying, "What are you doing down here? What are you doing down here, white boy?" I said, "I used to play with this band. I want to say hello." They said, "You get out of here." And they started yelling. One guy screamed, "You killed my grandparents, you son of a bitch, you white bastard. You beat my grandparents to death, you son of a bitch." I said, "I didn't kill anybody. I didn't do anything." But they kept raving. So I got mad. I shouted, "I don't want to hear any of your fucking shit. I didn't do anything to you." Somebody said, "You better get out of here, boy, if you know what's good for you." I said, "Fuck you all, man." They grabbed me, and one guy hit me in the back, another punched me, and I was screaming and swinging around. By this time, I was close to the bandstand, and the people taking the tickets saw what was happening and rushed out. I was raging. I used to play with this band. I think I hollered, "Benny," and he jumped off the stand and ran down there. The ushers were saying, "You've got to get out of here. Somebody's going to kill you." Benny comes up to me and says, "Oh, man." I said, "What is this? What kind of shit is this? I just wanted to say hello." He said, "This is what I was talking about before. I thought you knew about these things." I was crying by this time. They despised me. They wanted to kill me. Benny said, "There's nothing I can do, man. Come around after. We'll see you outside, around by the bus." The ushers escorted me out. I was going to wait and see the guys, but if I had gotten together with one of those black guys from inside, I would have killed him or gotten killed. I left the place and found me a jug and drank it and wandered around the town. I was mad. I was really confused. I was hurt. And finally, I got on the bus and went back to the post. I was drafted too late to get into a band. They needed people for combat, not for bands. But I had my horn sent to me anyway at Camp Butner, so I could play. I was stationed right next to the 225th Army Ground Force Band. And when I realized that, I took out my horn and started practicing in my barracks, playing out the window so they could hear me. They ran over and just wigged out when I told them who I was. They had all heard of me because I'd been with Stan Kenton, and they started a campaign to get me into the band. It was a difficult thing to do, but there was a warrant officer in charge of the band who played oboe and really dug me. He was a classical child prodigy from a wealthy family. I think he played with the Pittsburgh Symphony. He had blue eyes, blondish curly hair, a pouting mouth, and effeminate ways, delicate hands, long, slender fingers. He had a very refined manner of speaking and was brought up, I think, as a loner like myself, only he was rich. He didn't really care for anyone else in the band, and he had found a friend in me. In fact, he was a little overly friendly, and I always felt strange around him. He never made any sexual advances, but whenever I'd mention my wife or anything like that, he'd get uncomfortable and change the subject. It's a thing I've run into lots of times. Guys who liked me with almost a homosexual intensity, but with no overt actions. This warrant officer had a lot of pull, and he kept working, and finally, just before the outfit I was with went overseas, I got a transfer. That was right before the Battle of the Bulge, and most of the people in the outfit I was in were killed. But I got into the band. When it was time for the baby to be born, I got a furlough and went back to Los Angeles. Patty was living with my grandmother on 73rd Street. Her stomach was real big, and it was strange to feel the baby move. I was praying she'd have the baby before I had to go back, and just before I was supposed to leave, she started getting labor pains close together. We took her to the hospital, and I sent a wire to the warrant officer requesting an extension. I got a wire back. He said if I came right away, he'd guarantee we'd stay in the U.S. But if I didn't come back, I'd be AWOL, and I'd probably be transferred into another outfit and sent overseas. I had to leave Patty in the hospital. When I got to the base, there was a telegram waiting for me saying that the baby was born, a girl, 6 pounds, 8 ounces. She was born January 5th, 1945, the day after I left. I thought, well, anyway, I won't have to go overseas. But the reason the warrant officer had told me to hurry back was that the band was going overseas immediately, and he wanted me to go with them. We were shipped to Camp Miles Standish in Massachusetts and loaded onto a boat in a convoy and sent to France. Everyone was scared. The war was raging. The trip was okay until about the 14th day on the water when it got stormy. It was a bad storm and everybody was seasick. In the latrine, the vomit and the urine would roll from one end of this long tin urinal to the other, hit the end, and fly out onto the floor. It was hard trying to stand up with all the vomit and the piss. And then one evening, just as the storm was abating, I felt a huge lurching of the ship and heard an explosion. There were 2 more explosions. It sounded like they were right under the ship, and then all the lights went out. They started talking to us over the loudspeaker, telling us to be calm, not to panic, and to put on our life jackets. Finally, they called our group to get up on deck. We filed up, and it was night. The motors were all shut off. The captain kept talking over the loudspeakers as softly as he could. He told us the convoy had been infiltrated by German submarines. We were about 26 ships, and there were 6 Navy destroyers with us. On the trip, sometimes we'd see them running through the convoy. I was fortunate enough when I came up to get fairly close to the rail. I was able to see down. And even though the motors were off, the ship was drifting. And where it was floating through the water, there was phosphorus. That was the only light. You could see it to the left and to the right and in front, the light of the boat cutting through the water. I had my life belt on. It was cold. It was February, and we were just approaching the tip of England, going through the channel. This was the spot where the German submarines used to lie in wait to get the convoys. We were all scared to death. Every now and then, the captain, I assumed it was the captain talking, would say that they were going to set off depth charges. Don't be frightened. And that's what I'd heard at the beginning. We saw a huge explosion off the backside to the right. And a little while after that, there was another. 2 of our ships were hit and exploded. We thought at any moment a torpedo was going to hit us. You can never find out what happens, but I heard later that 3 submarines were hit. They kept testing by radar until they found that all the subs had left. And after a long, long time, they turned the engines on and we started moving again. But we had to stay on deck just in case. Sometimes they'd turn off the engines and lay on the bottom and wait. The radar picked up the engine vibrations. Up to this point, we hadn't known for sure where we were going, England, France, or North Africa. But at last we entered Le Havre, and I'll never forget the sight of that harbor. There were all kinds of ships sunk, huge hunks of wreckage. And I guess the harbor was shallow because they were just lying there in the water. There were gun turrets blown to bits. You could see these huge howitzers broken, all bent. The harbor itself was non-existent. There were no more docks, so the Seabees had made landing places out of metal stripping. The people started unloading, and we watched from a porthole. But when our ship's turn came to go to the landing area, everybody was unloaded except us. We didn't know what was happening. It was too good to think we wouldn't have to get off there and go to the Battle of the Bulge. We had been trained in stretcher bearing. If we did go, we served as medics, helpless, no chance of defending ourselves. At the end of the 3rd day, there was no one on the ship but the crew and the band. Our warrant officer couldn't find out why we hadn't received orders to debark. We wanted to know if we could get off the ship and see the town. So he inquired and found that no American soldiers could go walking around Le Havre because the French would kill them. The Germans had taken the town at first, and there was a little damage, but they did just what they had to do, nothing more. Then the Americans came and took Le Havre back from the Germans and just mutilated the place. They were barbarians, animals, and the French despised them. We weren't allowed to get off the ship. After 5 days, we were frantic. But at last, the warrant officer came back. He said, "I've got great news. We'd been ordered to Bournemouth." We landed at Southampton, where they had trucks waiting for us that took us to a convalescent center in the old city in England, a huge camp filled with people who'd been wounded in battle. If they weren't dead but were wounded so badly they could never fight again, they were sent to the States. But if there was any chance at all of mending them up enough to put them back into battle, they were sent to England to one of these centers. Our function was to play for these people and give them a little entertainment, a little joy. I stayed in the convalescent center for 8 or 9 months, playing and watching the V-1 and V-2 rockets fly overhead, bombing London. And then I became an MP. At the end of 1945, a lot of people were released from the war. They were sent home if they had enough points for longevity. Most of the guys in the band had been in the army for years, so they qualified to go home. And rather than getting replacements, they decided to do away with the band. I was put in the MPs and sent to London.